you so much for joining me today, Jo. Did you want to introduce yourself?
I would love to. Can I first of all start off by saying thank you so much for having me on. I am a big fan of your work and follow you on LinkedIn, and I feel in a really privileged position to be able to have a conversation with you. So thanks for your interest in me, first of all, and creating space to have this type of dialogue. So I'm Jo Major. I'm founder of two businesses, Diversity in Recruitment and Inclusive Recruitment Foundations. My background is recruitment. I spent, nearly 23 years, over 23 years actually, in the recruitment space, predominantly working for recruitment businesses in the recruitment industry. I've had a bit of a natural evolution to my career, moved away after 17 years of recruiting, moved into learning and development, fell into ED&I because it was something that I was passionate about, turned that passion into a journey of education, and then started to bring two worlds together, my recruitment background, my social awareness, and this newfound interest and area of education that I'd found in the ED&I space, brought them all together and thought, do you know what, I do not think the recruitment industry are doing enough around ED&I. We control 50% of the positions that are available in the UK. So we place 1 out of every 2 roles. And and if we are not talking about representation, if we're not breaking down the barriers that candidates face because of their identity, background and circumstances, how on earth will our end clients ever achieve their ED&I goals, right? So we need to sort our out, and that's what my business does, right? I help recruiters get to grips with ED&I in a way that makes sense to them and equip them with the tools and with the confidence to be able to not only make their processes more inclusive, accessible and equitable, but to start advising their clients and supporting their clients and developing their client services. And I also have another business, Inclusive Recruitment Foundations, which is an amazing e-learning program that I developed with my incredible business partner, Jenny Child. She spent 20 odd years in the in-house side. And we've developed that really for hiring managers and internal recruiters. So yeah, exciting times for the businesses, and hopefully that just gives you an outline of me and what I'm all about.
And then the second business is not purely for recruitment agencies, is it? You're branching out and it's going to be for pretty much everyone it will be relevant for. Amazing. I've obviously worked in recruitment too, and I can attest there is not a lot of diversity and inclusion in the sector. And it is true, it won't translate to the clients. And I think that what I've seen too is industries like tech recruitment, finance recruitment kind of reflect the industries and the actual recruitment agency side, that there's not a lot of diversity in both. And I think what you're doing is amazing, because if we can change that in recruitment agencies, that should hopefully translate into the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an important point that you just made there. You know, we're trying to attract talent, yet we're not representative of the communities that we're here to serve. And I bang on about this all the time. You know, why is the recruitment industry dominated by dominant groups, right? Why is there such a lack of representation? How on earth are we expected to engage with a whole range of talent when we only look like this over here, and we only have this lens to look through and this perspective to look through? And I don't mind saying it, I think we're a giant echo chamber. I think that we do not see the correlation between who we are, our background, identity and our circumstances, and who wants to work with us. I think it stops us from reaching a much broader skill set, a much broader talent pool. But we're still kicking it around, trying to do more, I guess. But yeah.
Well, what you're doing is amazing, and obviously we have you on today. I did post on LinkedIn, as you know, and on TikTok, asking people for the questions that they would want you to answer on this webinar today. So I'm just going to hop straight in and hit you with the last one, which is how do I know if a company is truly inclusive, or if they are just not disclosing the truth in order to hire me?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting one, and it depends really who this question's come from. In my experience, what I'm seeing is that organizations in their desire to become more representative are very focused on identity. And I talk about this a lot whenever I can, this diversity first approach to hiring. We've got a lack of diversity, so let's hire people in, and we're seeing a lot of tokenistic hiring, in my opinion, where people they're almost like got a bounty all of a sudden, like on their head. Their value has increased, because we deem them as being diverse, which is absolutely appalling, right? Because we're all diverse. We're applying these dreadful labels on everybody. So I think that if you are somebody who is from a under-recognized, historically marginalized, underrepresented community, you probably are you're probably a lot more aware than if you were, from a majority group on this, and perhaps you are also experiencing the diversity and inclusion fatigue that many people are that I'm talking to. People want to be hired because of their skills and experience. They don't want the pigmentation of the skin, or their gender, or their disability status, or their LGBTQ status. They don't want that to play a part. And so I think people are becoming acutely aware that there is a lot of performative work going on, and there is all of a sudden the doors have opened, right? And everybody's welcome into our organization. And so we've become a lot more, I think we're doing our due diligence a lot more. I know especially women of my age, I know a lot of women. I'm 45 now. The data tells us that by the age of 40 we start to face discrimination because of our age. You add on all the other identity markers and think about intersectionality, and look, there's even more barriers for us. And women in my kind of like social group are at the top of their game career wise, right? They're well into it. They're in senior leadership roles, top table stuff. Now this stuff is the most important thing to them, right? They want to make sure they do the due diligence, and they're making sure that the organizations are really practicing what they preach. And going back to your original question, I will do that, sorry, Alexandra, but going back to your original question, I think we have to be comfortable with the fact that there is loads of performative stuff happening. So we need to make sure that we are given the information from organizations that really give us that kind of like evidence that it's not just a statement on a website that says we welcome people from all backgrounds, please, or we are committed to diversity and inclusion, and we are really passionate about it. I call it the beauty pageant acceptance speech. We want to be able to see actually what that organization is doing for communities that we are part of. Some people say we want to see the receipts. I love that phrase. What is it that are actually doing to create equity and a level playing field within your organization? Can you confidently talk to me about that and give me the evidence of it and the reasons why you've done it and what it looks like and the impact that it has on me if I join your business? Or is it just those words on the website? And the line manager that I'm speaking to or being interviewed by hasn't got a Scooby-Doo about whatever it says on the website. So, a lot of the time it's kind of lofty statements of intent without detail, recruiters or hiring managers that can't tell you about any of the stuff that maybe was included in the advert. They're kind of, does that answer your original question, Alexandra?
Definitely does. So asking in the interview stage for some receipts, basically.
Yeah. But I would maybe even go a little. We're still not seeing enough upfront information about organisations' policies. You
Mm.
know, we're not seeing a lot of detail in an employee value proposition, which essentially is a marketing document that tells me why I should work for your business. We're not seeing ED&I kind of led in there. Some organisations are doing a really good job, but it's like, what asking, this might seem a bit bold, but like a business who's committed to ED&I should be able to tell us the 5 things that they've done recently to provide equity for people within their organisation, right? They should be able to clearly articulate the changes that they've made.
Mm. Definitely, 100%. Okay, great. Yes, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think what you said towards the start of your answer about tokenism is really true. I think that companies can hire people and then expect them to be like the DE&I champion of their workplaces, and all of the pressure then falls on those groups who are already marginalized to do more work unpaid,
Oh
usually.
my gosh,
So I completely agree with you. It's so good to ask at interview stage, so you can just avoid joining those companies altogether if you are in the privileged position to be able to do so.
and I think that point that you've just said is if you are, if you're in that privileged position, and I sometimes I will say, you should only choose companies who have A, B, C, and D. And and people give me a reality nudge sometimes and go, yeah, but I just need a job. And I guess there is going to be certain points in our career where we feel like maybe we don't have a choice, but that will change and that will evolve. And I would like to think that actually, companies are going to stop abusing their power, and actually, rather than just go, well, you know what, you either want to work for us or you don't, they're actually going to go, this is what we do, and this is how we will make sure that your identity, background, and circumstances don't have an effect on either getting into our business or being promoted and growing and evolving within our business.
I love that, and I think we're part of that change.
And they're ultimately they're going to be the employers that are attracted to attractive to especially our Gen Zers, right? All this data that we're getting from Gen Z about what they're looking for from employers. It'd be really interesting, wouldn't it, Alexandra, to really kind of to look at that data further down the line. 70% of people have said, for example, that representation is critical when making a decision about a role. Actually, is that looking for a job that that decision or that feedback or that answer on that survey, or is that actually in process? What is the reality? How many times have people actually turned down a job once they fought really hard for an offer? Where is the flex, or where is depressingly the compromise?
It would be amazing to see data on that, actually. I might check it out and see if anyone's done that study. But
like, have you turned down a job in the last 12 months because of A, B, and C? That kind of thing.
Maybe we can run that research together. That would be quite cool.
It would, wouldn't it?
That brings me on to question number 2, which I think ties in quite nicely to some of the things you've already spoken about, which is what resources or tools can individuals use to evaluate potential employers for inclusivity?
Good question. I've actually made some notes because sometimes I babble on and I forget to actually talk about the good stuff because I'm too busy philosophizing and giving my opinion on stuff. That's me earning it. I think there are resources. I mean, admittedly, the default is, well, you can check out, you can check out your Google reviews, you can check out your Glassdoor reviews. Somebody even suggested to me, one of my clients actually headed up their marketing. They were like, never forget, like when you go onto Google Maps and you type in an address, you can actually see the reviews at that point as well of an organization. So there's different areas where you can look for those reviews online. Glassdoor is the one that we kind of default to. Although this might sound controversial, but I'm not going to say whether, in my opinion, I am not sure that Glassdoor is the space it's intended to be when it launched.
You can pay to filter out your reviews on Glassdoor.
All of the bad reviews. For me, it's lost its integrity because I know that people have managed to get rid. And that is hugely disappointing. You know, it's cashed in, hasn't it? But maybe that was its intention, like, throughout. So take that with a pinch of salt. You know, I've seen organisations, they get one review, and then they'll ask like their entire team to put a review, and you'll see all the reviews around the same time of the year. So how amazing it is.
Like, I wonder what happened
there. I think there is a massive gap in the market for a non-commercial review space. There's somebody that I know that's currently thinking about that, so fingers crossed. So there's that, but I guess, you know what, you know, people's perspective is really, really important, but we've always got to remember that's people's perspective. I think for me it would be actually what would I use to assess, you know, and actually qualify this stuff. You know, there are things that I would look for. So, you know, I would be, if I was a candidate now out there looking for a role, I'd be looking at the diversity of the leadership team. I'd be looking at, like, but I wouldn't, you know, I guess because I'm mindful that we can't just take everything on optics value. You know, I'd like to think that you know, you dig below the surface and actually there's probably some real diversity at that top table, but they all just look like exactly the same white middle-aged men. But I'm a massive ambassador of the belief that we're all onions and we've got multiple layers, and I don't like to just focus on the dominant group's characteristics unfairly, because, you know, those folks still face barriers, right? But like, there is still the elephant in the room. There's a huge lack of representation. You know, even if you white men have identity markers that could create a barrier, they're still white and they're still men. So, you know, we want to see that leadership team. We want to understand, like, what is that organization doing to create representation, if not like tomorrow, in the last 5 years. You're like, what's their strategy? You know, how am I ever going to see anybody that looks like me or is from my community on that leadership team? Definitely inclusive practices and policies. We only ever normally find out about this stuff when we get the employee handbook. So for me, you know, the massive, big, glaring policy that I would be looking for is flexible and hybrid working. For me, that is the number one. If you don't have hybrid or flexible or job share or part-time working opportunities, I honestly don't think you can say that you're an organisation that's committed to diversity, accessibility and inclusion, because it's, you know, it supports so many underrepresented groups, so many, and half of the population. Right.
I was going to ask you about that. You explained beautifully, so that's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, things like anti-discrimination policies, things like promotions policies, things like a commitment to salary equality. You know, there are maybe, you know, how much can we expect? If it was me and I was doing great stuff as a business, I'd be publishing all of that stuff. It'd be all over my EVP.
Definitely.
But as a candidate, this is what those are my kind of top ones I'd look for.
What do you think? This is not one of the questions, it's just one from me leading into what you said, but what do you think about salary transparency within organizations, everyone knowing each other's salaries? Because I think that's a really good way to mitigate any people that are being paid unfairly based on things like their disability status, gender or race.
100%. It's definitely a movement that I'm seeing an increase in. I mean, I come from an industry where you could get fired for discussing your salary, and I never quite got it. I supported a system where the feel was there, you know, if you discuss your salary, it's a sackable offence, and I always wondered why.
They've made that illegal now. So if you they've made that illegal now. So if you discuss your salary in order to see if you're being paid fairly for your role and not being discriminated against, and someone gets in trouble for that, it's illegal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you know, and the reason why, you know, they try and shackle you with this stuff is because, you know, with the legal stuff is because salary inequality is alive and kicking within your organization, and once people start talking, the power and authority is lost, right, from whoever's making those decisions. I think that if you are an organization that is committed to salary equality, and salary transparency plays a part in that, then I think, you know, it's a USP. Talk about that in your talent attraction, and if you're a candidate and you see that, that's a massive indicator. You know, we've got to appreciate some businesses are still on a journey. They've got decades and decades of salary inequality to try and fix. I mean, you stop paying people so much money at the top and let's spread a little bit of the love throughout the business. It doesn't have to be something that takes a decade to fix. But yeah, these things can take time, but salary transparency definitely. And you know, that goes right through to your job descriptions. It goes right through to, you know, I'm a massive supporter of ending the salary history question, and preventing recruiters from asking that question and divulging that information to employers as well. And also encouraging candidates to stop talking about their salary history. Do not give that information. Say, you know, it's up to you, recruiter, to decide whether my skill set and experience is applicable to the salary range of £60,000 to £70,000 that you've advertised. My current salary has nothing to do with that.
Two-part question. So are there specific policies or practices that inclusive employers commonly have in place, and are there industry specific considerations when it comes to identifying inclusive employers? This person has said, I know construction is usually male dominated, for example.
So go and just break that. That's a kind of two-part, isn't it? Let's start with the beginning, but just because
That's okay. So are there specific policies or practices that inclusive employers commonly have in place?
First of all, they've usually got a commitment to inclusive, accessible and equitable recruitment. So candidates can kind of like see that stuff happening, you know, right from the beginning. They've usually got, I've written some notes so you might see my eyes. So they've usually got like an open commitment to training and education. So that has very much been part of their journey. And they should be able to talk about maybe the work that they've done with the leadership team, the work that they've done with the managers throughout the organisation. Again, we can't just show up and say we're an inclusive organisation. You're like, how did you get there? We just are. And it's like you look at under the bonnet and everyone's exactly the same, and you're like, well, of course everybody feels included. You're all exactly the same, for goodness sake. So yeah, so that commitment to education and training throughout the business is absolutely key. Things that I would definitely look for, the inclusive benefits piece. So, you know, going beyond that, you know, the initial, you know, commitment to salary equality, inclusive benefits. There are a few things that you know, there are a few things that really stand out for me in terms of benefits. So, like I said, hybrid flexible working for me, it's a non-negotiable. Things like family building policies. You know, if you're an organisation saying we love women, we really support women, women are so important to me and to us as a business, and then you're like, let's have a look at your maternity leave and it's statutory. And
no equal paternity leave either, just 2 weeks.
No equal paternity leave, you know, and all of that, or all of it's geared towards a traditional 1950s kind of vibe. You know, those policies that don't recognise that families are built in completely different ways, really, really key. Things like, you know, something really, really basic that I've seen more businesses doing, be more flexible about like bank holiday allowances, you know, offering people an opportunity to have flirting bank holiday days, so they don't have to have time off for, you know, they can take their time off for their religious and faith related or culture related days that they might have throughout the year. You know, at the moment we're still, you know, we're still we're still creating an environment where people have to take stuff out of their annual leave to celebrate the faith. Yet we still have Christmas and we have multiple bank holidays, don't we? 4 bank holidays that are all geared towards one particular faith that's, you know, that's not even, dare I say, dominant anymore in the UK, because we're, you know, we're so diverse from a religious and faith perspective. You know, accessibility and accommodations, right? If an organisation is not talking to me as a candidate about accessibility and accommodations, right from the early stages, even in the job advert, and no one's asked me about, is there anything we can do to make the recruitment process more inclusive for you? Yeah, for me, that would be a little bit of a red flag. And that, you know, we see this all the time. I think transparency as well around what they're actually doing. You know, I kind of mentioned before, I really am trying to encourage businesses to move away from these statements of intent and actually go beyond the reasons why this is important. It's really key for them to be able to articulate their why. But if you're a candidate looking at a business and you feel, oh God, it's really cheesy and everyone says it, it is usually because it's been written by marketing and it's about as deep as a puddle. I want to see our organisations being really transparent in the communication around their work and saying, we've got loads of work to do. Everyone who watches me on these things will get bored of this because I say it all the time. It's like, I want to see like the 10 things that they've done, right, to you know, to push down discrimination, prejudice and bias and promote equality, belonging and inclusion. The actual doing stuff, you know, the tangible things, I'd like them to be able to articulate those. That's what that's what gives me an indication of businesses that are going to be right for me. And then things about the future, so that real, you know, that clarity on the way that they communicate. They're not hiding behind their marketing department and a big marketing budget. They're actually showing the real stuff that they're doing, and they're being real. Yeah, and they're being realistic about it, Alexandra. You know, it's not just like, you know, wild objectives, like, you know, by 2025 this is, you know, we are going to be at this and this and these groups are going to be represented at this, and then no detail as to how they're going to get there. You know, and it's like, well, you need to create equity first for those groups that are missing before you hire in. Otherwise you'll hire in and people won't stay and you won't meet your goals.
Yeah, you won't be able to retain the talent at all.
Yeah.
Second part of this question is if there are any industry specific considerations when it comes to identifying inclusive employers.
Yeah, there are some like initiatives and pledges, you know, that sit above industries, where, like, you know, like people might call them charters, where people of business, you know, there's the overarching pledge, and it's about, you know, moving the needle on inequality for usually for a particular group. I've got my issues with that, but that's maybe for another conversation.
They do tend to focus on one at a time, don't they? I've noticed that as well. It's like, well, this year we're going to focus on gender. Next year we're going to focus on race. Instead of just let's actually make it inclusive as a whole.
Yeah, and nobody is just a woman and nobody is just a black person, right? There is, you know, lots of different layers of them that may be subject to, you know, to discrimination and prejudice or create a barrier, whether it's in, you know, in society or whether it's in employment. So there are some pledges and, you know, charters that businesses sign up to. I would always take them with a pinch of salt, right? If they are, some of them, if there's rigor behind them, if it's like, if you're signing up to this charter or you're signing up to this industry commitment, you can only do that if you do these 3 or 4 things in the first year, and then you go on to do those, or we've audited you and you are definitely doing this stuff. So I just, you know, awards, accolades, pledges, initiatives, again, it's about seeing the detail and not taking them on face value, because some of them are literally signing a pledge on the internet, and then you go, we are signed up to the pledge of A, B and C. Yeah. And this is used then throughout marketing. It's like, yeah, but what are you doing? What are you changing? Oh, we just signed the pledge. What does that do? What does that
Yeah.
do for the lived experience of candidates signing a pledge?
Great answer. And again, another two-part question, I think. So, what do you think are some potential red flags or warning signs that could indicate that a company might not be as inclusive as they say they are? And how can I assess a company's commitment to diversity and inclusion? I think you've kind of answered the second part of that question throughout, but maybe just the first part then. So, potential red flags or warning signs.
So these are I'm going to talk about these in absence, and at the same time we can also think about, what could think about that we want to see these, right? But things for me would be definitely a lack of representation. So if I was going for interviews and I'd gone multiple stages and I was just being interviewed by very, very similar people all of the time, not just from a optics perspective, but from a background perspective as well, and almost like a engagement perspective, that would be a little bit of a red flag for me. Especially if they've not addressed the elephant in the room. I think, look, it's all about transparency. If the organisation's gone, you know what, we earn it, we've got a hangover of 10 years of hiring the same people and we're on our journey to fix it, I'm cool with that as long as they're acknowledging it. If they're giving it the massive ones about their commitment to ED&I and representation, and yet their organisation are all exactly the same and no one's talking about it, that would be a red flag for me. No clear strategy. Right. I mean, I'm not asking for somebody to send me over a 25,000 page document, but I would really, clear articulation of why it's important without the marketing nonsense. Just a very, very clear, genuine, authentic why. And here are our objectives, and this is the way that we're gonna achieve them. If they haven't got an ED&I lead, if they haven't got any employee resource groups, if they haven't got any resources or budget for ED&I work, again, that would be a bit of a red flag. We can ask questions around that as candidates, can't we? Do you have any employee resource groups? Is there, what kind of resources? I'm really interested, or you might not be, but if you are, I'd be asking, I'm really interested in ED&I. What's the setup? What are the resources? Have you got somebody who leads the work? If the answer was no to the majority of those questions, and we're like, well, how the heck are they implementing it? There's got to be someone that leads it. Employee resource groups play a massive role in that, especially for medium to larger organisations. How the heck can you change anything without any money? So I'd want to see it almost like a pillar of the business strategy. I mean, that might be a bit ambitious, but for some organisations, it really is. Tokenism, right? So if we look on their website and they're spotlighting somebody who is it's clearly for the optics, right? And we know what that stuff looks like. If they're an entire organization packed full of people who look very similar from a race and ethnicity perspective, and then it says diversity and inclusion is important, and then the only image they've used on that piece is an image of of a person of color, right? For me, I'd be like, here we go, tokenism popping up. When they talk about when they talk about specific identities, I always feel really uncomfortable with that. We have a this, we have a that, we also have a fill in with whatever identity marker they're talking.
Saying we have a Black woman who works in X, Y, and Z. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, for me, that's just it's just like that. I think that person using people as the person, or the example, that may be the case, but it's the way it's your language, and it's the way that you approach the topic. I would far rather an organisation say to me, this is our diversity demographic data. We did a survey of representation in our business and this is what it looks like, rather than tell me that, that Shireen in accounts is from, this ethnicity or race group. Do you know what I mean? I don't need to do that. It's like, show me your data. Don't be using people as poster people to try and,
It's a bit dehumanizing.
Yeah, it really does, and it worries me that they're kind of like, it's so on the radar as well that they can point out anybody who may be, in their words, different or diverse. That you know, it's so cringe, and it's just, you know, that for me that would be a little bit of a red flag. This whole thing around language and messaging is really, really key. It can be, you know, it can take a while sometimes to get really comfortable talking about ED&I. And, you know, there's sometimes, you know, I sometimes might say something and I'm like, oh, I could have positioned that differently, and I'll adjust it in the moment, or I'll be like really, really aware of it. But there are some, you know, there is sometimes when people will say, you know, something like, you know, where they clearly don't understand the definitions of the terms that you know, that they're using. They might say, we're really committed to diversity and diversity and recruitment. Our recruitment processes are totally diverse, really diverse recruitment processes. And you're like, can a recruitment process be, you know, diverse as in what? You know, your recruitment process is inclusive. It's either inclusive, accessible, or equitable. You might, you know, is it diverse in the fact that we can use it in multiple different ways, but usually it's just a mixture of kind of like that language. So, you know, and it might be just clunky language, inappropriate statements. You know, sometimes companies, and I feel like I'm being a realist, right, with this stuff. Some people like use terms like underprivileged. We really care about underprivileged people. You know, we are really passionate about helping underprivileged folks, and they do it from, you know, have you come across like that whole saviorism vibe?
Yeah,
Where
it
it's
feels like charity work.
Like, heal the world, you know, that kind of thing. And it's like, and I'm just like, oh, whenever anyone ever uses that term, I'm like, oh, it's like they you know, they're under-recognized, undervalued, systemically excluded, systemically marginalized, historically excluded, and underrepresented. You know, that kind of, and that's just quite important to me. Also, another one, I could go on here forever, when people blend in CSR, corporate social responsibility, or mental health. You know, you might be a candidate asking around, you know, what's the business doing around equality and diversity and inclusion, and they start telling you the 10 things that they've done around mental health. I find this happens a lot because, look, let's face it, like, mental health is incredibly important. Yes, it absolutely blends in with ED&I, or it connects it, because all the reason, you know, people who are people who are disadvantaged by systems and processes and behaviour, or face barriers, or face discrimination and prejudice, will at some point, that can affect their mental health. So the two are connected. But, you know, a lot of the time there's so many resources for mental health because, let's face it, it can sometimes be a easier topic for businesses to approach. And it's like, when that becomes spotlighted, when the ED&I conversation comes up, I'm like, diversion tactic. Or when they start to talk about their ESG stuff, and, you know, yes, ED&I is part of that, but let's not divert the conversation, you know. And I find that often things like, also there's the basic stuff, you know, like no training. You know, maybe you fill out all your application, you know, them asking for, you know, wild things like you to fill out a 25-page application form. You notice that they use inappropriate pronouns on said application form. You know, there's gendered language throughout your offer of employment. You know, there's kind of like little things like that that can maybe indicate that the you know, the red flags. But we're all on a journey, so
Yeah, we are. They need to just come onto your LinkedIn page and take some notes. Or join the hub as well. I'm on your hub, which is amazing. Yours and Jenny's, which is really cool. The
Oh,
mailing list that comes out. Yeah, really, really good. And I do find that, yeah, the employers can be a bit anxious of saying the wrong thing, so they just don't say anything. But that's also probably more problematic, because if you end up accidentally saying the wrong thing, but your intent is good, obviously it can have a negative impact, but you can learn from that so that you're not doing that in the future. If you just don't say anything, nothing changes, and then everyone's still in a disadvantaged position as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all say things that maybe may not land as well as they could. But we just have to like not be fragile about it and move on from it. And you know, if you're unsure about saying something, just bash it into Google and it'll tell you exactly whether or not it's the right thing to say. I do, you know, sometimes I might use words. For example, I'll be writing a LinkedIn post and I'll use I don't know what you call them. I'll use a word that is, and I'll be like, oh, let me just sense check that word just to make sure it's not got any like inappropriate connotations or historical, you know, nastiness. So, you know, it's just been really aware, but I think not knowing what to say isn't an excuse for not saying anything.
Totally agree. And I think putting your ego aside when people do correct you is really important too, because your ego is not more important than people's lived experiences, and they're not trying to attack you. It's just like what you're saying is offensive, and just acknowledging that and making an active difference to change the way you speak is really impactful. Positively.
I mean, what you just said there is just so powerful and so true. You know, how often when somebody gives us feedback about something we said, do we center ourselves and make it all about how that feedback has affected us rather than how our microaggression affected the person? You know, and I think it's just human nature. We don't always get it right. If somebody say it's a gift, somebody telling you, because most of the time people will not, and you'll carry on doing it. And it's just like, thank you for the education. I apologize.
Thank you so much.
I
had no idea. Thanks.
How I might have made you feel. Thank you. Move on. Like, oh, I feel, you know, still talking about it 5 days later after they've written a post about how bad they felt about it. And it's like, oh gosh, look at you centering yourself there in that conversation.
And imagine how powerful it would be if everyone did that. Like the level of empathy and understanding we could build as a society purely just by putting our ego to the side and knowing people are not attacking us, or like we don't need to take everything personally because it's not personal.
It's not personal. It's just it's sharing education, isn't it? And you know, sometimes I see it from people who claim there's such strong connections with their level of, you know, they claim big claims for allyship, and then you'll be like, that thing that you said, that I just find that made me feel this. Wow, I do so much for your group. You know, I do so much for women.
For the charity work.
You know, I push and empower women. I'm all about women. I'll do whatever it takes. And I feel really offended that you would question me as a person and what I'm all about by like just give you a little bit of feedback that what you said was a bit weird and made me feel a bit weird. It's just like, you know, maybe a bit of performative allyship going on, but that's a different topic.
Conversation for another day. Maybe we could do a part 2 of the webinar.
Yeah.
And last question is, what are the most common challenges for employers to tackle and maintain diversity and inclusion? And is it specific to the company and industry, or are there some things that are just hard for everyone?
First of all, I would say that it's hard for everybody. I don't think there are any organisations that I can name you right now that are leading the work, that have got their entire house in order. You know, we're asking organisations to change decades and decades and decades, if not centuries, of systemic inequality. You know, in some cases we're asking organisations to stand in because government policy it is completely letting, you know, groups of society down, and that can feel overwhelming for some organisations, and I think there is a degree of pressure on them to do something really, really quickly. That's why we see a lot of the initiatives in the performative work that doesn't land very well and doesn't have any results, and so corporates feel like they've failed on it and they're like, it's probably not for us, you know, we've tried and it's not worked. So I think there is, it's really, really hard work. Fundamentally what we're trying to do here is change behavior, change ethics. We're trying to fundamentally shift the thinking of our organization, the thinking of our leaders, the thinking of our people. And it's a change management project without a doubt. And then they work through any resources or expertise or education at it. And it's like, it's usually put down to like, for HR to fix, and it's it's got to start with the leadership. It's got to start with the chief executive leadership team. It definitely, I think, transcends down rather than somebody over here trying to change everything. I think a lot of organisations they don't start with the data. For me, that is where everybody should start. I mean, first of all, you start off with your why, right? But you can't start coming up with your objectives unless you understand your data. So you might make an assumption that you lack representation, but actually you do a diversity and demographics data and you use somebody like Kat Wildman from Powered by Diversity to do that because it's done well and done properly and done in an inclusive way. And all of a sudden you have a real insight into the makeup of the people within your organisation. You blend that in and compare that in with an inclusion survey and you get an absolute reality check of people's lived experience within your business. And from that, you've immediately got pain points that you never knew were there. And so that's your immediate, that's your bedrock really, for you. That's where you can then start to move on and look at your policies and start to look at, are these policies influencing the lived experience of these groups? And, are they influencing, can they change the behavior? So yeah, I think it's like, starting with the basics is what a lot of organizations miss, and they go straight into the hiring in approach, all the cosmetic stuff. We want everybody, our doors are open for everyone without actually seeing it as a strategic piece of organizational change work. But it's hard. It takes time. It takes resources. It takes a change in mindset, and ultimately, we've got to find it within ourselves to understand that this is not about, that diagram. Equality is not pie. Yeah, it's a really interesting diagram, and a lot of the time there's this fundamental belief that by creating equality, somehow it takes something away from me. By giving to you, I'm taking away from me. And look, we all work in challenging times, and there is, the reality is that many people feel really threatened. They believe that by creating equality means that there's less for you, less for them, and I think it's about changing this mindset that this is equality benefits everybody. From a commercial perspective, we know all the data behind it, and that's really what we, what our motivation should be, not what we're losing personally, because we're not losing anything. Majority folks have generally got nothing to worry about, right? It's about what we're gaining, what we could be if we were this, what could we be, what will happen to us when we are better. So I think, yeah, it's that a shift in mindset, but it's difficult, and sometimes people revert back to it's too much, it's too difficult to solve. But of course it's difficult, but nothing worth doing is super easy. And we are trying to unpick decades of poor performance and behaviour and policy and inequality. And it's one step at a time. And I think we need to give employees a break. We need to maybe, for those who are trying and who have a plan and want to get somewhere, let them do it, support them. If it takes 5 years, it takes 5 years. If it takes 10, it takes 10.
Completely agree with you that you can't improve on something if you don't know where it's currently at. So actually looking inward and seeing where your company currently lies is something that's really important. People do just jump the gun and they're like, let's just hire more people in, and they have no idea what they're improving on. So completely agree with you. And yeah, that concludes the questions for today. So thank you so much. If people wanted to hear more from you, what should they do next?
So, I mean, follow me on LinkedIn. I tend to I know not all of your community will hang out on there. I mean, look, you know, I'm 45. I'm not so good with, you know, Instagram and
TikTok,
TikTok.
Instagram.
I need to do a TikTok. Anybody out there that wants to show me how to do TikTok, I'm all over it. But yeah, LinkedIn is definite. I mean, I do a lot of work trying to influence change within the recruitment industry and employers, and that's where my world is. But as you mentioned, I have the hub as well, so feel free to provide a link for that, which is where, you know, anybody who's interested in this work can kind of go on there and find some useful resources and other people who are trying to fight the same fight.
And
But
the hub
thank
is
you for
currently
having me.
free. The hub is
Sorry,
currently free, isn't it? So people can
yeah,
go
it's
in for
free.
free,
It's
no
free.
charge.
Yeah, there's no charge to it.
Yeah.
You know, at some point we may develop some area. That's the beauty of the hub. We can have loads of free stuff, and there can be, you know, accessible, financially accessible paid areas as well. But you know, everything that we're putting out at the moment is free, and there will always be an element of free stuff because it's not packed full of stuff Jenny and I have personally created. It's stuff that we see. So I'm not going to start charging for stuff that's in the public domain.
Yeah.
Maybe for like the deeper dive stuff that we've created, yes, but not for the other bits and pieces. Thank you so much for giving me a voice and a platform to talk about the things that I'm really passionate about.
Thank you so much for being on here. It's been amazing, great chat. And yeah, I'll put links to everything up so people know how to contact you moving forward. So
Lovely.
thanks, Jo.
Thank you.